People to come. First, I would like to say that we're very happy. ASLA, the Stewardship Committee, as well as the California Landscape Contractors Association, we put this on together, and we're very thrilled that you're here. When we planned this event, we were hoping that we might have 40 or 45 people, and as the registration shows, we have close to 100. So I think that tells us that we need to do more of these things. Of course, depending on how this goes, and maybe that changes. But, so we have a much larger turnout. Chris Rosink, is Leaf here? I haven't seen him.
I don't think he's here.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that saves us a couple minutes of introduction. So I would like to really quickly thank all the committee members of the Stewardship Committee. And if you could real quickly stand up when I say your name. This way everybody can go to you if they have questions. So Gary Hoyt, thank you, he's back there with the hand up. Joey Jacoby. Okay, you can just put your hands up. John Roshinsky, who's not here. Kasia Trojanowska, right back there. She picked up all the food today. Marianne Maram. Michelle Landis, who also happens to be one of our panelists. Sharon May. And myself, I'm the chairperson, taking over from Marianne May, who started this committee. And then our newest members are Joy Lyons, put your arm up, hand up, Jackie Higgins, Seth Seaton from Bellegarde, our photographer, also the person who provided the drinks, and Chris Rosink from Hunter. Thank you. Thank you very much, you guys. And we'd also like to, again, thank the CLCA for helping fund this. And we understand that through Patrick Crace, you could stand up wherever you are. Or put your, yeah.
We added $44.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. So his committee, I think it's called I apologize, it's the Resource Management Committee.
Thousands of dollars.
Yeah, okay, they donated thousands of dollars. Most of that goes to me. So thank you very much, Patrick. A quick announcement. Actually, Patrick, you stand up one more time so everybody can see who you are. The City of Santa Rosa is offering a Return on Investment Calculator seminar March 6th. And for more information on that, you can go to Patrick later on, get some flyers. But it's going to be a great opportunity to see how this program works. And am I shouting too loud?
Please come, or I'll get in big trouble.
All right, so we added something to this presentation today, and that's to bring, some of you that are here came to the ASLA Stewardship's Sustainable Design Charrette, where we took an old project, 11-acre business park, and we decided we would like to, as landscape architects and landscape contractors and civil engineers, all grouped together, see if we could come up with a better design that's more sustainable, and then see what the cost is. And in that process, we were working with Seth from Bellegarde, looking at permeable pavers. And so we did this at Mesa College. We broke up into 5 teams, and basically we had a lot of fun. I got to dance with Sharon May. That was the best part. And my wife was okay with that. And then afterwards, we had a little quick presentation. This was the original plan done by the architects and the civil, not by the landscape architects. And then I want to quickly show some of the quick responses. All these plans were done in 3 hours. It was an all-day event, but part of that, most of it took up time just me talking. And so we looked at the plan that worked out the best, and frankly, the biggest problem was getting the parking to work out, the quantity. And so everybody did really well, but we ended up going with this one. And then, I don't think that's reading very well, but we put it into CAD, and we're in the process of doing a return on investment study. And at this point, I don't know if you can read that, but that's the cost. It's not my phone. The cost, Sharon, if you could read that, if we just looked at the hardscape for the parking lot, it was 1 million, is that 800?
463,000.
Yeah. And then if all we did was just change the paving to permeable pavers, the cost was 1,000,007. So it was a little bit less without changing any of the design. But then when we looked at the cost of changing the design, we were able to reduce the amount of parking, or not the parking spaces, but the amount of paving. And the reason that this was so successful is by looking at reducing the amount of impermeable paving, we completely eliminated the storm drain system and all the other components that go with that. And we haven't even looked at the cost of some of those other components. This is just removing the pipe. Yes, and so the savings on this is $612,000 and some more dollars. So I'm not going to go into more detail because of time, but we're going to have another event that will go into this in great more detail later in the summer. So we'll look forward to seeing you all at that event. Yes?
I didn't understand. You put permeable pavers. What did you say?
Well, we put down permeable pavers instead of asphalt, and that allows the water to go through the pavement. Is this the part you did or didn't understand?
No, but I know what permeable means. Where's the savings from what?
From not having to put the drains in.
Oh, just installing. Okay.
Right. It's a significant change. Yes, sir.
It was soil engineered to be permeable enough that you can eliminate drainage even in the worst weather.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't mean to evade the question, but because of time, I can't go into that. But we're working with Seth on this, and in all situations, whether it's sandy soil or clay or anything in between, all the different ways that we handle that, it still ends up being cheaper. And sometimes we'll use pipe, but smaller pipe, or sometimes we just use the aggregate as the conveyance of the water. So I apologize for not going into depth. I just wanted to kind of whet everybody's appetite to maybe come for more events so we can share with you more detailed information. So I kind of have to expect Sharon to put the end or the stop sign up there. Anyway, so we are done with that. So if Michelle, you could move that back out of the way. Yeah. So tonight we have a panel of 4 distinguished guests: a landscape architect, Michelle Landis, a landscape installation contractor, John Mones, a landscape maintenance contractor, Pete Abernathy, and another maintenance contractor, Raj Brown. And I apologize, but at the value of saving some time, they are all very qualified. They all sent, per my request, they sent me bios so I could tell you, but they're great. And I can't turn the pages. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask them some questions that our group has put together for them, trying to stump them. And we're going to give them each no more than 2 minutes to answer. And we'll see what kind of time we have at the end of this. So Sharon, we'll look at your watch. Okay. If there's time, there's going to be questions. You guys can ask some questions. But I'm the one with the microphone. So question number 1, and we'll start with Michelle. Generally speaking, I feel like the dating game. Generally speaking, what are the aspects of your work that make your projects as environmentally respectful as possible? And our other microphone wasn't working, so I'll just shout.
I think because I come from a multidisciplinary background and have been very involved with some of the restoration community, when I'm designing, I try to maintain the connections of the existing systems Sometimes those are hydrologic connections. Sometimes those are habitat connections. It might not always look like habitat restoration, but there's definitely an element that is supporting maybe pollinators. If it was coastal sage scrub that we removed, maybe there's a type of planting that supports those pollinators, but in a more horticultural looking setting.
Thank you. The one thing that makes our projects sustainable, or I should say our goal is to reduce carbon footprints as much as possible, not only by with all of our clients' gardens, but also our company ourselves. We do not use any leaf blowers, we do not use any gas-powered equipment, and we do not use any chemicals. But the major aspect in what we provide our clients is education.
As a contractor over the last 20 or 30 years, and we're doing, I think, probably what all the contractors that are here tonight are doing. You can't waste water, so we certainly have put a focus on making sure that that we're putting in good irrigation systems. We certainly are areas of turf where we have an opportunity to do that. We're trying to use all the new technology that's available today with smart irrigation and more mulch. And I think we've always focused on making sure that whatever we are installing, the workmanship is at a high level. In construction, you either do the job right or you do it wrong. So it's so important to do right. And it's really great to see the green industry, the landscape industry embracing sustainable practices. And the last few years, our company's been involved with some very exciting applications. We've put in 3 50,000-gallon rain tanks on a site recently, and a very large the new Palomar Medical Center Hospital is a huge site, and all the storm water runs to an extensive system of bioswales and biobasins, whereas no storm water ever hits the street gutter. And we're seeing more decomposed granite walkways where you're able to allow the water to permeate into the ground versus run off, and just using salvageable materials on site. We had one project that just had a ton of boulders that we were able to incorporate into the project. Project came out beautiful, and we didn't have to truck anything off-site.
I think for us, I would say site-specific design, installation, and maintenance is really important. So coming to the site, figuring out what is going on the site, whether it's the plant material, the sun exposure, wind exposure, reclaimed water, learning all of those aspects and figuring out how you're going to maintain the site, and then mapping out the site for irrigation to know where your hydro zones are, what kind of water budget you can create so that you really get a good, clear understanding of the site and how to best manage your team of guys that are out there and the inputs that are going in. And I think once we get that good understanding of the site, it's a real education effort with our client and our crew to make sure that we're best managing the site. And if there are inefficiencies within the site, making those recommendations to really bring it up to speed as far as irrigation or maybe some of the plant palette choices. There's a lot of different things that can be done there. I think from the training point of view, we're doing a lot of irrigation training with our guys, sending a lot of them through the Certified Irrigation Tech program. Also getting all our crew leaders through a really rigorous education program right now, just so that they understand clearly what the regulations are, how to best manage their site. I think from the fleet sense, we've been looking at all of our equipment, whether it's the vehicles that we drive, bringing those down to hybrids and making more fuel efficient choices there. And in the field, the two-stroke switch outs to four-stroke engines, some of the stuff we're doing.
I'm going to see if this is working. Is it working at all? Okay, I'll shout here. Thank you for those answers. They were all wrong. That's the way it goes. I have to say, one of the interesting things about this event, is this even worth it? No. That's right. One of the interesting, can you hear me back there? Okay, thank you. One of the interesting things about this event is, in most cases here, I think we're all either landscape architects or landscape contractors or landscape maintenance contractors. And we all know that sometimes there's this kind of finger pointing going on between the two professions. And while I suspect that I'm probably preaching to the choir, because if you're here, you probably don't necessarily have this relationship with the landscape architect or with the contractor. But we need to try to mend those challenges that each of the disciplines have with each other. And that leads me to the second question. And it's a good thing I printed this in 24 point, so I can read it from here. So the question number 2 is, could you each discuss your thoughts on what you think the other 2 disciplines could do to make your efforts or project better? And we'll start with Rob. Without calling names.
I wish I had written in bigger font. I would say for us, the design and construction of soil profile is really important to how successful your landscape is. If we have some sites, a lot of our sites are pretty old, and the soil came from a cut landscape, and there was never really any good soil management plan. And it's really hard to make a landscape work if your soil does not have the nutrients that it needs. So I think that's one thing from the design phase forward, just to make sure that soil is really kind of at the forefront of the design. Site-specific plant selection, I think, is really important. Putting large trees into really small spaces that we then either have issues with them lifting up the side of the building or sidewalks and so forth, ends up we'll have to remove it or get a dissatisfied client. Irrigation design of hydrozones, putting appropriate plant material in separated hydrozones. So if you have turf, separating that from the shrubs. But that can also mean if you have a turf area and it goes from the southwest side of your building and stretches into the northern side that's got a tree canopy, it's really hard to irrigate that correctly, because on that southwest side you need a lot of water. On that other side of the building, it's going to be wet and mucky all the time, and we see that a lot. Let's see. One thing that I work on the installation side as well, and this has been a learning process for me, but plants being installed at the appropriate depth. And we see that a lot with the water rebates for turf removal. They require 4 inches of mulch in some of these. So with the normal spec of where your plants should be planted, if you're planting succulents, now you have 4 inches of mulch up next to the base of it, and it can cause some serious mold and fungus issues, and the plant dies.
It's not a gang sign, that's a 2 minute.
Well, when I think of when I address the landscape architect, the first thing that comes to mind as a commercial contractor, everything we install has been designed by a landscape architect or a designer. And I've got to come back and say, respect the design, respect the fact that an architect or a designer has taken the time and has worked with the owner to come up with the plans for a project that they envision being installed. And you know, there has to be an understanding that jobs don't always go in as designed, and so that's where good communication comes in to make sure that the architect, the owner, and the landscaper are working together on all the issues that they're facing to, again, at the end of the day, install that job to the spirit of the design. There's challenges today. The cost. A lot of times we're on a site and the owner wants to save some money. And so there's an opportunity to value engineer. I'd hate to say that we're out looking to do that, but again, we want to install a project at a high level of workmanship. We want the landscape architect to be happy. We want the owner to be happy. In regards to landscape maintenance, you know, I want to just see the maintenance contractor maintain to good best practice fundamentals. And hopefully as the landscape contractor, we put the job in at a high level and it's going to be easy to maintain.
Before I have a little fun with this, I got to tell you about my background a little bit. I received a bachelor's in landscape architecture for my schooling, and then after that worked as a landscape contractor, commercial. After a few years of that, worked for an international design build company, worked throughout the States, worked in the design department, but then also worked on building the projects wherever they were getting built. And then for 13 years worked in landscape architecture offices in San Diego before starting my own holistic landscape maintenance company. So I'm gonna have fun and pick at everyone tonight. No, for the landscape architects, my suggestions would be as part of your conceptual design development, construction documents, specs designs, perhaps maintenance specs or maintenance details would be a great help. And then also too, perhaps discussing maintenance costs when you're doing preliminary construction costs with your clients. We know a lot of times that value engineering, happens. It's out of control of any of our, disciplines. But and then the last thing would be to design for long term. As far as the landscape contractors go, I think just strong communication with the landscape architect is really the only comment I can make there. The maintenance contractors, I just have two things. And one is, can you please take the stakes off the trees before they die? and no more weed barrier, please. Thank you.
Since I'm the only designer at the table, I have a lot to respond to. But so if I get my share to critique, yes, I know. For the critiques, for the installation part, I think all in all, the contractors that I've worked with, Benchmark is included in that. We have a very open, good communication, and I value their insights. They have insights that I, as a designer, don't always have because I'm not out in the field. And a couple examples that came up recently are, a lot of times now we're designing a very sustainable low-water landscape against a building that has all new UV glass, and the reflection off that glass, they're telling me, is over 180 degrees. So it just is like the death ray that sweeps through the landscape. So, those are things that as a designer we don't always anticipate, and we really value their insights that they bring this concern up front, hopefully early on in the process before we have plant material that might be sensitive. So I think that good communication, again, most of my contractors have been great, Those RFIs are invaluable. If you have a question, call us, because unfortunately we've had cases where the landscape contractors, for whatever reason, don't want to just put in that call to the office. So I think reach out to us as much as possible. From the maintenance end, I think the practice of the traditional blow and go and shearing everything into balls and sausages and weird shapes, as a designer, it's just so painful to come out to a project that has just been massacred. I also think that Sometimes there's renovations. You know, we plant a baby landscape and there is maturity over the years, but there's always a structure to the design, you know, the intent of the designer. And some of those plants are key pieces of that design structure. So when you start removing things that you think aren't doing well and you're not putting the right structured plants back, it starts to make the landscape look very haphazard. So I would say get the landscape architect involved in that.
So now it's your turn to respond to what you've just been told you should do better.
To the point of falling the shrubs, I knew that was going to come up. I agree with the point about presenting a landscape maintenance package with the initial design, if it's, especially, you know, if you can sell that to your client, because that's invaluable. We rarely get to see a landscape plan, but then if there's additional graphics that you created that went along with that, that show the perspective or sections and how things are going to look and should be maintained, it'd be great education to share that with our guys, but we just never see it. And you know, it's an ongoing training effort with our crews to go towards naturalistic pruning. They love the hedge trimmer. Let's see, what else was there? Not sure what else. What was it? Tree stakes. I agree. Yeah, training. It all comes down to training and getting, you know, crews to really see and understand what's going on in the landscape, how long things have been in, and just trying to step out of the routine. In commercial maintenance, a lot of people tend to fall into a rut of doing the same thing over and over again, and you lose your perception of what's around you. And it's easy to overlook tree stakes, but it just comes back to training.
I appreciate hearing everybody mention good communication, because in this business and just in about everything we do in life, communication is so valuable. I guess with working with the designer and architect on a job, I think for the installation company, time is money, production is important, and if we could just, I guess, have the architecture out there almost full time while we did our work, then I guess everything would be perfect. And that's not always the case, but that's certainly a concern as a contractor trying to be productive is to keep those crews busy, making sure that there's no idle time, and a lot of times there's plant inspections, and the designer wants to help with the placement and wants to ensure the health of the plant, and it's a challenge. But you know what? Again, we respect you know, the effort that's gone into the design, and there's that.
Because landscape maintenance is new to me, I'm learning as I go, but I'm also kind of stepping away from, you know, traditional standards and industry standards, and trying to walk the walk of this sustainability movement and green movements. So if anyone has any suggestions, I'm more than happy to listen and to take those tasks to another level.
So I agree actually with the design, and you know, I think we come as designers and we come from many different backgrounds in many regions of the country, and sometimes we don't have a knowledge base with the correct plant for the correct exposure in the correct climate. So I think that, you know, the continuing of our discipline to self-educate is important, and I like that. We like to do the maintenance and operations manuals, Very few developers are willing to pay for a long-term vision thing. So that really comes down to the client being willing to, after the fact, fund something like that. Again, with the CA is also one where our budgets are just next to nothing. We would love to be out there more often, but not always in the budget.
So I agree with everybody, it's all about communication. I'm going to take 1 minute to tell you a story that I think everybody will relate to. I recently had a conversation on the phone with a client who's a developer. I get 30 seconds. And they gave us all these 2-foot wide planting spaces going up and a 3-foot wide walkway to the house. And it was a 35-unit housing project. And we sent them the planting plan for their review, and he shot right back, said, way too many plants. And he said, why do you have all these 1-gallon shrubs in the 2-foot planting space? Just put ground cover in. Because the ground cover we could space farther apart. And I said, well, that will be cheaper initially, but the maintenance contractor is going to have a nightmare maintaining that as the ground cover is covering over the walkway. We've only given them a 3-foot wide walkway. I said, it's going to be a lot more expensive. His immediate response was, I don't care. I'm selling the project. And so my first thought was, okay, great, I can see it just now. The landscape contractor is going to be out there looking at the plan with my company's name on it and saying, what the heck? What is this guy thinking? And of course, I won't be there. And so I'm getting chewed out behind my back for not doing a practical design. So I think and it happens on both sides, we don't always know how something got to be where it is. And I think it's one of the values of this event tonight, is to continue to open up this communication and realize that, like in life, as John said, it's so important, and we don't always know all the facts about why the other people did what they did. So on to question number 4. She just put up the sign for me to end. But once again, I have the microphone. So again, this whole thing is supposed to be about sustainability. So the next question may sound very elementary, but it doesn't have to be elementary. What are the most common plants used that cause problems from a sustainability perspective? Not just water consumption or using them in the wrong hydro zone. What about allowing you to install sustainably and maintain sustainably?
I broke this out into a couple categories, but with ground covers, there's a lot of ground covers that are marketed as very sustainable, low water use, low input, but out in the field it turns out it's somewhat different. Red apple is one of those that it's everywhere and it's seen as drought tolerant, clients ask for it, but it just doesn't work that way. And the amount of fertilizer to keep it looking green, it gets to be a bear to maintain. As far as trees go, liquid ambers and ficus, we see a lot of issues with the roots pushing up structures nearby. That's unsustainable for the maintenance of the sidewalks as well as the planters around the tree, because we end up getting a lot of root intrusion. It's hard to plant underneath them. And then invasive grasses. With the trend towards low water use plants, a lot of grasses have come in and we now see them self-seeding everywhere. It's pretty hard to keep them in their own defined spaces and from escaping into wildlands.
Oh, Raj, red apple ice plant. The trees in turf